G'day everyone, welcome back. We are now moving on to episode 8 of the beginner progression series, and as you can see on screen, we have now started farming artifacts. Before we move on to the artifact dungeon, I do want to give you a small bit of advice in regards to your runes. Now, we just set up our R5 team, which was 3 full teams of runes. What I do actually recommend you doing before you start building the artifact dungeon is going and doing a save rune of all monsters in the rune section. It's much easier for you to rune up a dungeon team than it is to rune up R5. What this allows us to do is we can just always rune up a new dungeon and then just load our save runes so that we can go back to farming R5 at any time we'd like. We ended up testing many teams just to try to make this work, and we did finally come up with a team which was consistently a little bit faster than the other ones, as well as being decently safe. We've just finished our 30 runs. Let's have a look at how this one went here. Okay, so as you can see here, this one had a single loss at a average clear time of 109 with a fastest of 54. This was actually on the slower end. I've seen this one complete a 30 run with an average of 105, an average of 107. So it's in the ballpark of about 105 to 109. Okay, so looking at the team, I want to talk about a few things first. The first team I actually tried consisted of Eirgar with Rayok and Crow. And now this team unfortunately does not work for a beginner. And the reason being is the Eirgar's AI is actually kind of terrible. He doesn't always use his S2. Most of the times you actually lose is because he'll end up using S3 into S1 like 2 or 3 times in a row, and then you'll just end up being wiped. Because of this, we knew we had to take a more consistent buff blocker. We eventually actually tried the Fire Lizard first, and he actually wasn't good enough. His S2 is only a 75% chance, so this actually wasn't cutting it either. And then we decided to move on to Ling Ling. Now, I know Ling Ling works perfectly well. However, I wasn't too sure if she would still work without skill ups, which is what we're going to have to be if we go straight into this now. And honestly, she works perfectly fine without skill up. Her AI is actually amazing. She pretty much will always use S3 if it's up, and she pretty much will always use S2 if it's up. So the good news is her AI is wonderful. So we ended moving on to this team here where it was Verd, Ling Ling, Lauren, Rayok, and Crow. And now this team actually did work really well, except for one small thing. Now the problem actually wasn't the buff block, it was now the heal block. This Thunderbolt passive is really annoying because as you can see down the bottom here, it recovers the boss's HP by 10% whenever a Thunderbolt is dropped, and it can drop up to 4 Thunderbolts, so it can pretty much just heal 40%. And unfortunately, wouldn't you know it, Lauren's AI isn't all that amazing either. She doesn't really use her S2 whenever it's up. She can go using her S1 6 times in a row. It is what it is. This team by far had the best average clear, and if we had a bit better artifacts and rune quality, there would actually not be an issue. So if you are looking at this guide and you're maybe a bit more progressed, you could potentially try this team and it might work for you. The biggest reason why this team actually doesn't work is actually more of a damage issue rather than the heal block landing. So we decided to try a team that gave us some healing as well as an attack break. Now, the reason the attack break is actually really good against this boss is it reduces the amount of Thunderbolts that hit. So 1, our team is most likely not getting stunned, and 2, the boss is also getting a reduced healing from its passive. I'll show you guys a 30 run just now on the screen. So this team was pretty much 100% safe. I think in 100 runs, we maybe failed once or twice, and it was a consistent 1 minute 20, 1 minute 25 team. This was such a drastic difference from the previous team, so I wanted to find maybe something in between. We decided to play with these 3 units as our main core. So essentially what we needed to do to make sure we had a fast team was we needed to take another unit that could potentially heal block or attack break because they both are really good. So we could use Seren. Seren has an attack break on her S1. She has a heal block on S2, and she has a team up with a defense break on S3, which actually does a lot of damage as well, which is super perfect for this team already. For the last slot, I tried using Rayok, and this team ended up being about a 1 minute 12 to 1 minute 13 average 30 run team. And then we moved on to trying Crow, and this is where we got the faster time, where it was between 105 to 109. So right now, this is the best lineup that I could achieve on this account. Moving first on this team is Ling Ling. Now, she does have a pretty long cooltime on her skills, but the cool thing about it is she has an activation rate where she can actually proc into every skill. You will find, even unskilled, she is going to be more than enough to be your buff blocker for this dungeon. She also has a slow on her S3, which is actually really good for increasing the stability of the team as well. I quickly wanted to deviate to the passive again one more time. Whenever the enemy's 5th turn ends, this will drop a Thunderbolt. So what I also realized was I kind of wanted my Ling Ling to be a little bit squishier than some of the other units, as we don't really need her past the first 2 rotations. Once we get the buff block on her, The Lauren and Verd pretty much fully controls this boss, so she doesn't really need to be alive. So this allowed me to build her on triple fight with, I think it was defense, crit rate, attack percent with really just average runes. We've obviously grinded some of them out as we've been farming solo R5 just before this. The one thing you need to remember is you do need a decent amount of accuracy on her. I think the cap for this dungeon was 35, but it might be 45. I was running this initially at 41 accuracy and I didn't really notice anything, anything bad going on as well. Next up, we had Lauren, and she was on a triple fight set with one intangible rune. Now, she does kind of need to survive as her and Verd pretty much control the boss completely. So if she does go down, it could be an issue. So I do think you should probably build her on the tankier set if you do have one. Moving next was Seren. You're going to put her on as high a damage set as you can. I don't think I was able to get a 100 crit rate on her, but this is what we came up with and it was working perfectly fine. Seren is on a fight blade set, attack, crit damage, attack, and on the artifacts here we looked for crit damage or damage dealt on win, and the right side we haven't really farmed, so I'm just using whatever we had. The crow definitely needs to have 100% crit rate, so I do think you should prioritize building this unit first. He is the second last to move on the team, and we had him built on rage blade, attack, crit damage, and attack. One thing I do recommend with your crow is just to make sure it is tankier than the Ling Ling, just so that he doesn't get targeted when the boss might accidentally get a turn due to bad RNG. Moving last, we have Vertiheel. He was on double fight broken. We had him on attack, crit damage, attack. We also don't need to get max crit rate on him as he is a fire unit and he gets the 15% attribute bonus from attacking a weak element. For this team, the attack order is straight boss. You don't need to deviate. Holy moly, what an artifact. There are some potential improvements you could make to the team. If you do have a Zinc, you could put the Zinc in the spot where the Ling Ling is. Zinc has an AoE defense break, which will definitely help with clearing up some of the trash waves. In that case, it also might be better to put a Rayoke in here as well. The other team you could potentially try to see if it's a little faster is a Rayoke with a 2A Colleen, and this 2A Colleen would move first on the team to give them attack buff. She also gives us that secondary heal block as well as a brand. For me though, I'm probably just going to run this team for a day or two, and then we're going to pop over onto the other side of the artifact farming dungeons. For the artifact dungeon videos, we're going to do a set of 3 videos. The first video is going to be about the Steel Fortress, which we're farming right now. The second video will be about the right side, which is the Punisher's Crypt. And the last video is going to be about the exclusion settings you can set up for a beginner in the game. One thing that was recently added into the game is if you go into the cell selector tab here and you press on the cog, you're able to find people's recommended settings for artifacts, runes, and gems and grinds. Feel free to go save one of the settings here. However, I will also make a video about what I think is the best settings for a new player. If you really wanted to, you could go fuse up skill ups for the Ling Ling, but I honestly think you could also just wait and skill her up over time, as she is definitely consistent enough for this team right now. That's going to be all for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Peace out.